In Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, 10 strangers are invited to a secluded island, only to find themselves trapped in a deadly game. With each passing hour, the body count rises, and the guests must uncover the identity of their mysterious host before it's too late. This classic thriller is a gripping tale of suspense and betrayal, guaranteed to keep readers guessing until the very end. 10 strangers, each covering secrets and hidden motives, are gathered to Soldier Island under mysterious circumstances. Among them are Anthony Marston, a wealthy and impulsive young man, and Emily Brent, a stern and judgmental elder deeply entrenched in her religious convictions. They arrive believing they are visiting old acquaintances, unaware of the sinister trap awaiting them. Vera Claythorne, a former governess with a shadowy past, assumes the role of a secretary, while Philip Lombard, an adventurous ex-soldier, and William Blore, a former detective, anticipate a weekend of surveillance duty. Dr. Edward Armstrong, a skilled physician burdened by past regrets, believes he has been hired to care for the island owner's wife. Also present are General John MacArthur, a guilt-ridden retired military man, and Justice Lawrence Wargrave, a sharp-minded former judge, both expecting a reunion with old friends. Ethel Rogers, the timid housekeeper, and Thomas Rogers, the stoic butler, complete the ensemble. When the visitors arrive on the island, they are greeted by Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, the butler and housekeeper. They inform the guests that the host, whom they refer to as Mr. Owen, would not arrive until the following day. That evening, while all of the guests are gathered in the drawing room following a delicious supper, they hear a recorded voice accusing each of them of a specific murder that occurred in the past but was never discovered. After comparing their notes, they come to the conclusion that none of them, even the servants, are familiar with the name of Mr. Owen, which suggests that they were brought here in accordance with a peculiar plan devised by someone. Tony Marston falls to his death after choking on the poisoned whiskey that they were discussing at the time. Fearful, the party goes to bed, where practically everyone is tormented by feelings of remorse and flashbacks of the crimes they committed prior to their retreat. According to Vera Claythorne, there is a striking resemblance between the passing of Marston and the initial stanza of the nursery rhyme 10 Little Indians, which is displayed in each of the sleeping quarters. The guests discover the following morning that Mrs. Rogers had seemingly passed away while she was sleeping. Despite the fact that the boat that is supposed to transport supplies to the island on a regular basis does not show up, the visitors are hoping to depart that morning. The 3 individuals, Blore, Lombard, and Armstrong, come to the conclusion that the deaths must have been the result of a murder, and they make the decision to search the entire island for the unknown Mr. Owen. But they are unable to locate anyone. While all is going on, General MacArthur, the oldest of the guests, is convinced that he is about to pass away and goes to watch out for himself at the ocean. Dr. Armstrong discovers the general dead from a blow to the head just before lunchtime. The surviving visitors get together to talk about the circumstance they are in. So they come to the conclusion that one of them must be the murderer. There are a lot of people who make hazy charges, but Judge Wargrave reminds them that the evidence that is now available implies that any one of them could be the murderer. The afternoon and dinner pass tensely, and then everyone retires to bed, closing their doors behind them. When they wake up the following morning, they discover that Rogers had been murdered while he was chopping wood in preparation for brunch. It is at this time that the visitors have the impression that the killings are being carried out in accordance with the instructions given in the nursery rhyme. In addition, they come to the realization that the dining room table had 10 Indian figurines at one point, but that one of the figures vanishes upon the passing of each individual deceased. Emily Brent has a tiny degree of euphoria after breakfast, and she stays at the table by herself for a considerable amount of time. A poisonous injection was administered to her neck, and she was discovered dead shortly after. Wargrave now begins an orderly search of everyone's things, and anything that could be used as a weapon is placed in a secure location immediately after the search is initiated. The remaining visitors are gathered together, spending the time by looking at each other with a dubious expression on their faces. Vera finally decides to take a bath, but as she is about to do so, she is frightened by a piece of seaweed that is hanging from the ceiling, and she ends up crying out. While they were running to help her, they discovered that Wargrave had been injured. When Blore, Lombard, and Armstrong come downstairs, they see Wargrave draped in a curtain that mimics courtroom robes and with a red mark on his forehead. After conducting an examination of the body, Armstrong reveals that Wargrave was shot in the head of the victim. That evening, Blore is awakened by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Upon opening the door, he discovers that Armstrong is not in his room. The hunt for Armstrong by Blore and Lombard is fruitless because they are unable to locate him anywhere in the home or on the island. Upon their return from their hunt, they find that there is an additional Indian figure that has been removed from the table. Blore, Vera, and Lombard go outside and make the decision to remain on the open countryside because they believe it to be safer. A decision is made by Blore to return to the house in order to obtain food. Upon hearing a crash, the other two individuals discover that someone had knocked a statue out of a window on the second floor, so causing Blore's death as he approached the house. Both Vera and Lombard make their way to the shore, where they discover the body of Armstrong, who had drowned, lying on the surf. Vera manages to convince herself that Lombard is the murderer, so she takes Lombard's gun and shoots him. Happy to have made it through the ordeal, she goes back to her bedroom to rest. However, at the moment that she discovers a noose waiting for her in her chamber, she experiences a peculiar urge to act out the final line of the nursery rhyme, and she ultimately decides to hang herself. The cops are unable to solve the mystery until they discover a manuscript contained within a bottle. The document was written by the late Judge Wargrave, who explained that he planned the killings because he intended to punish individuals whose actions are not punishable under the law. In a straightforward manner, Wargrave states that he has a need for blood and that he takes joy in seeing the guilty punished. When Wargrave was informed by a physician that he was terminally ill, he made the decision to end his life in a fire rather than allowing his life to pass away gradually. He talks about how he selected his victims and how he destroyed Marston, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, MacArthur, and Emily Brent. After that, Wargrave goes on to explain how he deceived Dr. Armstrong into assisting him in faking his own death by offering to meet the physician at the cliffs in order to develop a strategy. Wargrave threw Armstrong over the edge into the water when he arrived, and then he went back to the home and pretended that he had died. Through the employment of his pretense, he was able to get rid of the remaining guests without calling their attention to himself. When Vera had finished hanging herself from a rope that Wargrave had prepared for her, he intended to kill himself in such a way that his body would fall onto the bed as if it had been laid there. In this way, he believed that the authorities would discover 10 dead bodies on an island that was completely deserted. If you like to hear the full version of the book, please find the link below.